Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Natalie Sayre, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices, and additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. The Citizens Clean Election is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The system provides clean funding for qualified candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. These include contribution and spending limits, forgoing special interest money, and participating in commission debates. We encourage audience questions, so please utilize the note card you were given when you entered the room and hold it up. Our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. If you have a question for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card. It will be considered during the second half of the debate. We screen questions for clarity, to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for up to 90 minutes, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight's debate includes 1-minute opening statements. The first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes for each candidate to answer the same question. After all candidates have responded, the first responding candidate will have an additional 30 seconds. We will rotate which candidate starts first. The second half will allow for a different question per candidate, 1 minute to answer, and some questions will have an optional 30-second comment period on the topic for the other candidates. So just raise your hand if you would like that 30 seconds when it's been called. And finally, 1 minute closing statements. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how much you may agree or disagree with anything being said. So tonight's participants are Mr. Rick Gray, a Republican candidate for state senator in District 21. Ms. Kathy Knecht, independent candidate for state senator in District 21. Mr. Bradley Hughes, a Democratic candidate for state representative in District 21 and a clean elections participant. And finally, Mr. Gilbert Romero, also a Democratic candidate for the state representative in District 21 and a clean elections participant. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting with the Senate for opening comments, and will proceed from that starting point. The order for the second half will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name, starting with the House. So at this time, Rick, will you start your opening comments? 1 minute.
I've been fortunate to be a part of several of them, and I appreciate all of you that came out too, as well as you that are watching on the film. And I want to also thank my wife, who we just celebrated our 21st anniversary yesterday. Yes, thank you. Although they said not to applaud. We have 4 kids. I've got 6 grandkids. I was a small business owner before I ran for the legislature in 2010. I've served 3 terms in the House, and I was appointed this year to the Senate in LD 21 to replace Senator Debbie Lesko, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Kathy, 1 minute.
I'm Kathy Knecht, and I've been dissatisfied with the trajectory of many of the aspects of politics in Arizona. And I believe that until we change the legislators, we'll continue to have the same results. I'm an independent because I'm independent and have been registered like that for 23 years. I'm very well qualified for this job as a past school board member, past president of the Arizona School Boards Association, the executive director of Leadership West, which gave me a broad experience in the issues that face our community and relationships with many community leaders. And I'm ready to fulfill the collaborative necessity of moving forward with the people of this state.
Thank you. Before we start with Brad, we've had some new entrants into our audience. I would like to remind all of you to please silence any and all electronic devices and refrain from any outbursts or reactions because we are filming for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. So we appreciate your respectful participation as an audience member. Brad, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank the Clean Action Commission for having this debate tonight and for everyone that came out, everyone that will watch it later. I want to use my opening statement to give a little bit about my background. I was actually born in Kentucky. I grew up in a very small town of about 400 people. I lived there until I was 18. I went to college and medical school at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. And after that, I moved out here to Arizona, and I've lived here for the last 8 years. I have 2 sons. My oldest is a second grader in the Peoria Public School System right now. And, excuse me. And the reason I'm running for this office has to do with 3 main factors that we'll get into hopefully during this debate. The first being healthcare, the second being public education, and the third being taking care of the corruption that has plagued the state capitol for decades now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gilbert, your 1 minute opening statement.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gilbert Romero, and I'm one of the Democratic candidates for state representative here in Legislative District 21. I want to thank the Citizens Clean Elections Commission for hosting this debate and the City of Peoria for allowing to use the City Council chambers, and to all of you for coming out tonight. I'm a community organizer, I'm a labor activist, and a mental health advocate, and a lifelong resident of what is now Legislative District 21. I'm running for state representative because I am disappointed in the leadership that we currently have, as evidenced by the lack of participation by my opponents, Tony Rivero and Kevin Payne. And I'm running because we need leadership who will show up for our community, for the working families of this community, and for the working families of Arizona. For the past 10 years, we have seen a sharp decline in funding for public education, and we need to start fighting for the folks who cannot fight for themselves. So I ask for your vote, and I'm excited to debate the other candidates and to hear what everybody has to propose tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, we will begin the portion of the debate where each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the same question. Kathy, will start with you. At the end, after Rick responds, you'll have an additional 30 seconds to comment. So here is your question for all of you. What have you heard from your constituents are their top 3 concerns? And Kathy, we'll start with you.
So I've been knocking on doors throughout LD21 in Peoria and Surprise and Sun City. And what people want to talk about, surprisingly, even in Sun City with families who don't have small children, everybody wants to talk about education. And polls support that's what top of the minds of people in the state of Arizona. And I think the reason that it's universal is because even if you don't have cute little kids in your house, you recognize that almost every part of the quality of our lives depends on education, whether it's safe neighborhoods or how many people are going to, and the other 2 are healthcare and quality jobs being attracted to our community.
Thank you. Brad, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I already gave you a preview of my answer to this question in my opening statement. I don't think it's any surprise that education is the #1 issue this year. I think any candidate that you ask will tell you that, even though we may have different perspectives on how we need to address that issue. But everything that's gone on this year, from the Red for Ed movement, and even going back to last year with Prop 305 and the voucher expansion, everyone in Arizona is concerned about the future of our public education system. And rightfully so. I think every candidate that is running this year should be mainly concerned with our public education system and our funding going forward mainly. The second issue, of course, will be healthcare. As a physician, this is really the issue that got me going in this election, even before the Red for Ed and all the education issues came up. But everyone needs healthcare. Everyone wants affordable healthcare. Everyone wants access to healthcare. I've seen personally some of the issues that can come up when people are denied healthcare or when they go long periods without having coverage. I see the issues with rising drug costs. I mean, in my own practice, I actually have to give my patients coupons, discount coupons, so they get their life-saving medication when they go to the pharmacy. That should not be happening in the United States of America. That's ridiculous. And in Arizona, we can actually do things on a state level that will insulate us from any changes we see federally. So whether you like the Affordable Care Act or not, we don't need to be too worried about that. If we can take steps here in Arizona that are going to set us up going forward, and then they can sort that mess out in Washington if they ever do, but we don't have to worry about that because we're taken care of. And the third issue is corruption. I hear about this probably just as much as I hear about education. So we've seen a lot of stories recently about all the corruption around charter school funding and how some lawmakers are even lining their own pockets with the laws that they're passing. People do not like that. They do not want to put up with that. And that's what we need to get out of the state house. That's one of the reasons why I'm running for this office. My opponents in this race, Kevin Payne and Tony Ribeiro, they have their own issues with that corruption, which I address. And I hope we can get into that more tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Gilbert.
Yes, so the top 3 issues that I keep on hearing while talking to folks in the community is number 1 is public education, the lack of funding for it. In the past 10 years, the Republicans in the legislature have taken over $1 billion from our public schools, and that is, we are in an education crisis. So education, number 1. Number 2, healthcare. The cost of healthcare is rising exponentially. We pay some of the most highest premiums, deductibles, and care for costs, but get some of the lowest quality for healthcare. And the third issue that I keep on hearing out the doors is taxes. The fact that working class and middle class families pay way too much in taxes while the rich and corporations pay virtually nothing in taxes. In Arizona, 74% of corporations pay less than $50 in tax liability a year. And those are the top 3 things. And unfortunately, taxes kind of feed into the first 2 issues, education and healthcare. When folks don't pay their fair share, the rest of us have to pay. So those are the top 3 issues that I keep on hearing in the community.
Thank you. Rick, your 2 minutes.
Thank you, and it seems like we're consistent because I think education is obviously the top issue. Although, when you look at what we've done in the past few years, we have, I think, been very successful in moving the money over. This year alone, we put $684 million toward education. We also are working to address the district additional assistance. We put $100 million this year. I won't go into it because we won't have all that. Well, I'm sure we'll be addressing this a little bit later too, but education is one of the top issues. Education is our highest budget item. We pay over 55% of our budget toward education between K-12 and college. And healthcare is another one of those issues. That's a concern for most people. We've had the whole Obamacare fiasco where we've seen people lose their coverage. We've seen their costs going up. Health issues are a very strong concern for most people. And then also the economy. When I first started, when I first ran, the economy was one of the top issues because people were losing their jobs, they were losing their houses. We have now come out of that, and again, I'll talk more about that during this debate. But those 3 issues, I believe, are the top 3 issues.
Thank you. And Kathy, an additional 30 seconds.
I'm sure we will talk some more about education, but just to finish up my thought on healthcare, I think the 2 areas in healthcare that are premium on people's minds is the healthcare for seniors who are dealing with whether or not they're going to have enough during the end of their lives and the time of their lives when they need more healthcare, and also do we have the kind of jobs that are going to support our tax base and ensure that we have the services that we need to support our communities.
Thank you. So let's go to education. Brad, we'll start with you. What is your position on the Invest in Ed movement, and would you support tax increases to fund it?
So the Invest in Ed initiative, I did support it. I will admit I was lukewarm at first. The reason being, I feel like we need a more comprehensive solution. I think that the Invest in Ed initiative, the tax base that they were going to create there would have been a good start, but the fact is we need to do more. So yes, I do support a tax increase to fund education. The question is, how do we get that tax increase? Where does it come from and who pays for it? So one of the things that came about when Invest in Ed was first revving up, getting media coverage, was, we saw this chart over and over again that shows those at the very bottom of income levels actually pay twice as much as far as a percentage of their income in total taxes as those at the very top of the income levels. That is wrong and immoral. We should not be doing that in a state like Arizona or a country like the United States. We need a system that is fair for everyone. And I know people like to talk about income tax alone and how those at the top pay a lot more as far as income tax go, and that's true. But you can't look just at income taxes because there's several different types of taxes that we all pay. Income taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, which is the main culprit behind why our system is so unfair. So we need to revamp that whole system so that instead of those at the bottom paying the most, we even it out. So we give those at the bottom a break, bring them down more in line with what the middle income earners make. Those at the top, yeah, they need to pay a little bit more because they have built businesses and they make that income, and that's great for them, but they don't do that alone. They rely on all of us for our labor, for our roads, for our educational system. So yeah, everyone has to chip in their fair share, and then the corporate tax side is a whole other issue that we need to revamp. And I think if we do that in a fair way, we'll have plenty of money to fund education in Arizona for years to come.
Thank you. Gilbert, same question.
Yes, I did support the Invest in Ed initiative. Unfortunately, under a technicality, it was taken off the ballot by the Arizona Supreme Court. However, it did not go far enough. And also, I would like to remind the audience that we only got that 20% on the Invest in Ed policy by teachers standing up for themselves, standing up for their students, because initially the Republicans and Governor Ducey wanted to only give a 1% tax increase. And so, folks, we fought for that 20%. It does not go far enough, but I was proud to support it, and I would be proud to support it even further in the legislature. We need a long-term funding solution to public education. You know, I find it fascinating that we're always, scrounging for dollars in the couch to fund public education, when pre-recession in 2008, we were funding education not where it should have been, but a lot better than it is today. And so when folks try to ask us, oh, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to get it to this level? We were already paying it for that level back in 2008 before the recession. And so we need to properly fund education, and the way we're going to do it is by taxing corporations. Right now in Arizona, corporations enjoy 334 tax loopholes on the books. Now, some of those tax loopholes include a tax credit for folks with memberships at country clubs. Now, I don't think folks who can afford to participate in country clubs they need another tax credit. Tax credit needs to go to folks, or rather, we need to get rid of those tax credits so we can fund education properly. And again, I think a lot of people don't want to talk about raising taxes, but the money needs to come from somewhere. And again, we were paying that before the recession. And so when people tell us we can't pay for it, I just don't believe that. So we do need to raise taxes, and I do support the Invest in Ed initiative.
Thank you. I'm going to again remind the audience to check your electronic devices, phones, anything that's going to make noise. We are recording for on-demand viewing as well as the post-captioning services. This is where that's really important. So again, please check your devices to make sure that they are on silent. Rick, your 2 minutes.
Thank you. No, I did not support the tax increase. One of the things, and it's come out, there's still some people that don't understand that, but in 2015, we changed the tax code to adjust for inflation. I think the lowest level shifted at about $20,000. So if you were at that level and you had a inflation increase that would throw you over into that next bracket, your tax would have gone up and you would have actually made less money just because you got that inflation increase in your taxes. So that was unfair. We ended up changing that. The language on the ballot initiative did not correct that. And so in essence, their goal was to say, we're going to tax the rich, but what they would have done was raised everybody's taxes because it would have wiped out that inflation setting. Now, my view is, and again, I'll throw out some figures. In July, and this is from the JLBC, Joint Legislative Council, July we had $915 increase, which was a 17% increase. Everybody's saying we need a steady special funding source. Our economy is growing. I won't go into all the details. We can talk about the figures later, but our economy is growing because we've made some strategic plans when it came to growing our economy. So you can do one of two things. You can either cut the pie to where one piece has a little bit bigger piece, or you can grow the pie. What we've been doing in Arizona has been growing the pie. So we're seeing revenues now of way more than what we've projected. We had conservative projections of less than 5% that will take care of that 5% each for the next 2 years. And our projections are very conservative. We're seeing those numbers grow beyond that. We are actually seeing the pie grow, so we're going to see our revenues grow without raising taxes.
Thank you. Kathy, your 2 minutes.
I would have signed the Invest in Ed only because there was no other plan on the table. The immediate crisis is real, a teacher crisis. In our classrooms, we have overcrowded classrooms, we have fewer people, fewer teachers applying for the jobs. And the teacher crisis is something not everyone understands, in that we have enough certified teachers here in Arizona, but they're not taking the positions in the schools because they're not getting paid enough to feed their families. So the governor promised 20 by 2020. And we were able to give our teachers 9%, but those raises were given by sweeping money from other funds. And there's no plan for sustainable funding for teachers and schools moving forward. So I would have signed that, or I would have voted for that, because we're in an emergency state. And there's no other plan on the table. And until there is, and I hope there will be, and when I get in the Senate, I'll work with both sides so that we can find long-term sustainable funding for our schools. So that if there is another downturn in the economy, which is due any day now, unfortunately, we won't have to solve those economic problems on the backs of our kids and our teachers like we did in 2009.
Thank you. And Brad, your additional 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I want to address two things that Mr. Gray said. One, he mentioned increase in your income, bumping you another tax bracket, and you actually make less. That's not how tax brackets work. Only your income that was in that new higher tax bracket would be taxed at that rate, so it wouldn't cause less. As far as the legality of if Invest in Ed would have undone that, there was debate about that. I honestly am not a lawyer, so I don't know if that is true or not. And the other thing about budget projections, I would ask, and I don't know the answer to this question either, what were the budget projections in 2007 and 2008, and how did that work out for us?
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to respond to something
sorry.
Senator Gray said.
Sorry.
Oh, my apologies.
It'll only be a response in the second half, and it will be announced, and it would be a response to the topic, not to the individuals at the table.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, we've had some new people join us, so I would like to remind you to look at your phones and any electronic devices that you may have and make sure that they are on silent. We'll do one more question in this round for education, then we'll move on to some other topics. So we will start with Gilbert. And what type of holistic approach would you consider to reform charter schools?
Thank you. I do not support Proposition 305. Charter schools, unfortunately, have very little oversight. A recent study by the Arizona ACLU found that in their study over 400 charter schools, over half of them were engaging in discriminatory and exclusionary behaviors and practices, most notably students of color and students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so we need higher oversight on charter schools, because unfortunately right now it is a way for a lot of individuals to make a lot of money. We've seen in the news certain legislators who stand to benefit financially for the sale of charter schools and turning them into nonprofits and what have you. And so we need higher oversight in our charter schools, because right now there is very little. And again, we've seen through investigations, through independent bodies, what happens when we don't have oversight. And so we need a serious reform and investigation of what's going on in our charter schools, because right now our legislature is not holding these folks accountable. Basically anybody who wants to start it's now a business venture to start a charter school. And that is not how we should be treating our kids in this state. And so I highly would really look at what's going on in our charter schools and investigate and hold people accountable for any abuses or financial fraud that might have been going on in our charter schools.
Thank you. Rick, your 2 minutes.
Well, my view is we need a complete comprehensive reevaluation of our K-12 system, not just the charter schools, but the district schools. Yes, there have been some outliers in the charter schools where there have been problems. There's been the same with district schools. Scottsdale was one of the big issues that came in focus lately. We have such a convoluted financing system, as well as Title 15, which is the rules that our K-12 system functions under. We need to have a comprehensive review of all of our system. We've had, in fact, I've looked at Title 15 and talked with actually Denton Santarelli when he was, when I first ran, and he talked about the frustration of having that growing and growing. It's not just one versus the other, and I think that's one of the challenges we face when we get into that competition, district schools against charter schools. But both are viable, both are an option, parents have a choice. We need to look at the system holistically and say, how can we improve this and make this good for everyone?
My turn?
Are you finished, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, so then yes, Kathy, it's your turn, 2 minutes.
When Arizona went down this road to do competition, I liked the idea of charter schools at that time, in that they would be places that educators started, and they would be places of innovation that would come up with creative ideas and share them with district schools. I believe if the state really wanted to foster more choice, better choices for parents, they could have and should have enhanced the school district's ability to do that. School districts have done that on their own. And in fact, I can't think of anything outside of a religious education that students couldn't get within the wonderful Peoria Unified School District. And so, you know, when we talk about competition, competition is one thing when everyone has the same amount of resources or adequate resources to grow and thrive and innovate and try new things. But when we're in a climate of scarcity, what happens is it becomes dog eat dog and kill or be killed. And that's really not fair, because when we're talking about winners and losers in education, whose kids is it okay that we say it's okay that you lose? And so the better way, I think, would be to ensure that our tax dollars are used where they are most accountable, and most transparent, and that is in our public school districts.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you. Charter schools play an important role in our K-12 educational system. I certainly don't want to see them go away. But if you support charter schools, you should support more transparency and oversight, because if it continues going like it is, there's going to be a backlash. And those bad actors that are abusing the system and stealing our tax dollars, they're going to bring those good charter schools down with them. So this is why we need to act now, get in front of this before it becomes an even bigger problem, and then we can have good district schools, we can have good charter schools, and everyone can be on the same team. Charter schools last year got about $1.3 billion in funding. Now, that's more than 10% of our total budget, so anyone who says they don't want to provide adequate oversight for that huge chunk of our budget is not fiscally responsible with your tax dollars. That's just not an acceptable way to legislate. We need to get rid of the self-dealing. We need to have more teeth with our charter school board, so that when these schools have financial problems, they can take action before it gets to the point where they shut down, like we saw in Goodyear this year. And then those students go to school, teachers go to school, and the doors are locked and nobody knows what's going on. Meanwhile, the owner left town with millions of dollars of your tax dollars. That can't be allowed to happen. So that's why we need these reforms, make the entire system work like it's intended to. We don't need to be making millionaires with our educational system. That's not an efficient use of our tax dollars. So yes, I support a wholesale revamping of our oversight and transparency for our charter schools.
Thank you. And Gilbert, your additional 30 seconds.
Yes, I'd like to respond to something Senator Gray said around, yes, there are abuses that go on in public school districts, and in the case of the Scottsdale School District, those folks are held accountable. Those folks there are folks who are paying penalties and are going to, correct me if I'm wrong, they're being held accountable by the law. That isn't happening in our charter schools. Right now we have, like Dr. Hughes says, we have folks making millions and millions of dollars on the backs of our kids. So the stark difference between the Scottsdale example that you gave and most charter schools is people in the Peoria in public school districts are being held accountable. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. And I don't like using the word competition when it comes to our children's education. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Rick, we'll start with you. What is your position on upgrading our infrastructure, roads, highways, bridges, et cetera?
I think that is one of the most important things that we can do. I mean, obviously, outside of education, but we've got a serious issue. It's not something that attracts a lot of attention, but it has a huge impact on our economy. We need to, again, look at where, fortunately, most of our roads in Maricopa County are great. One of the challenges is when you get outside of Maricopa County, you've got some serious problems. And I think that's one of those issues. We've started to address that more in the legislature in the last few years, but I think it's a major concern, and we need to continue to work on that.
Thank you. Kathy?
So, in several years past, HERF funds have been swept, and so the quality of our roads and other roads has suffered because of that, because there hasn't been the funds. Because as we have had not enough to fund education or other areas of the budget, we've had to sweep that. Well, to me, it seems like if we are not funding the infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, that ends up costing taxpayers more in the long run. And so, like we try to keep our houses up, or we try to keep our school districts up, if we don't invest in the maintenance and repair along the way at regular intervals, it ends up costing us a lot of money in the long run. And in a worst case scenario, it threatens people's lives. So we need to ensure that we have the funds to support our infrastructure moving forward.
Thank you. Brad?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm going to echo some of what you both said. The sweeping of the highway funds has been a major issue for decades. And this is part of a bigger problem when we see our legislators serving an ideology rather than trying to do what's best for us. So that ideology is never any tax increase. It's always bad. We can't do it. This year they passed an $18 fee. So to kind of get around that wording and play games with us, they want to add this fee on that was supposed to go towards the highway fund, but because of the increased education funding, they ended up taking that money too, I believe. So our highway fund is just getting left behind, and a county like Maricopa County may have the funds to keep up with that, like Mr. Gray said, but the rest of Arizona doesn't. So this is why we need a more comprehensive, universal funding solution for Arizona. We've been slashing for 25 years, and now we're trying to slap Band-Aids on everything just so we can avoid saying the word tax increase, and it's just not working. So this is where you have to change course. And that's why you can't get stuck to an ideology. You gotta be open-minded. No party or ideology has a monopoly on bad ideas, okay? Sometimes your good ideas are gonna come from the right, sometimes they're gonna come from the left, sometimes they're gonna come out of left field. So you have to be open to all of those things. That's why we need a funding solution. Then we can talk about taking care of our roadways going forward, which I think we all agree is a very important issue. And as Ms. Connect said, costs us more in the long run. And to tie it into education, those school buses, they go thousands of miles every year. They need maintenance, they need new tires. That is all made worse by having roads that are not upkept. So it's costing us more that way too. So this is why we need to get out of this rut we've been in for 25 years and actually do something for once.
Thank you. Gilbert, your 2 minutes.
So Arizona is actually in the unique position where we are a very new state. So a lot of our infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways are actually, in Maricopa County at least, are actually in pretty good shape, but it won't last forever. And I agree with Dr. Hughes that we do need to raise taxes and have a long-term funding solution for our roads and bridges. But one thing I actually do want to talk about when it comes to infrastructure, a lot of folks don't think about, is internet. Internet is not a luxury anymore in this modern economy. Internet is, in my opinion, a utility. And so I believe to keep costs low from private internet service providers, we should have a public option. Now, what a public option would do, it would make it more competitive, because right now in Arizona and in many other states, depending on where you live, a lot of companies like Cox and CenturyLink have a duopoly on zip codes, right? They have a map and they say, okay, you get this neighborhood, you get this neighborhood, and a lot of folks in our community only have options, especially like in El Mirage, for only one internet service provider. So if we have a public option of internet paid through the government, costs would actually go lower because it would make it truly competitive. So I think internet is something that we really, really need to start investing in. Again, it's something that isn't talked about, but in this day and age, you can't do much without an internet. You can't apply for a job without the internet. You can't, that's the biggest thing. You can't apply for a job, you can't apply for school, you can't do a lot of things without the internet. So having a public option would really, really drive the costs of internet and also make it fair for everybody. So that is what I would do for our infrastructure in the state.
Thank you. And Rick, your 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to address the HERF fund reduction, because remember, we've come out of a great recession. We had a problem making ends meet at the Capitol. When you've got people that have lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, raising taxes on them is the last thing you want to do. There are a lot of people that are on the brink. Yeah, there are people that are comfortable and a tax increase isn't going to hurt them. But those that are on the bottom, a tax increase hurts. And so we are coming out of that. We are seeing more revenue come in. So I'm sure we will be addressing, and we have started that with the HERF fund.
Thank you. Next question. Arizona is at a crossroads for water policy. What is your plan for water? And Kathy, we'll start with you.
So Arizona is in the midst of a drought that's lasted over a dozen years now. And so I take the environment and our water conditions very, very seriously. We know that if the level of Lake Mead drops below 1,075 feet, that major changes to the way we live here in the cities and the way agriculture works in our state will have to be undertaken. And so we need to be prepared. I think our cities have done a really good job in making sure that they have a 100-year water supply, not only for us to drink and to shower in, but to ensure that our economy will continue to thrive because of the ability to build houses. So I think that the state needs to do more to ensure the same sort of water resources moving forward. And I don't know if we'll have another question about the environment, but I think that our legislature has ignored the environment as a topic of real import. And because of the heat index here, especially in the Phoenix area, keeps rising. And if we create a community where people don't want to live and businesses don't want to come, we're going to have a lot of trouble with real estate and bringing people here who want to live and thrive here.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you. I'm glad we're talking about water policy tonight because I think it's one issue that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And obviously, we live in the desert. We don't have a solid water supply. We don't have a community. Now, there have been negotiations going on with surrounding states for the drought contingency plan for years, and no real progress has been made. I'm hoping that in the near future we can sign on to that. The way it stands now, my understanding is Arizona will see significant cuts, and California will see none. We're renegotiating that, and California is willing to take some of those cuts away from us, which I think is very generous of them. We need to get on the ball here and sign on to that before we have a bigger problem. It's almost a foregone conclusion that we will hit that 1,075 feet level at Lake Mead. We will see those Tier 1 cuts. Lucky for us, those Tier 1 cuts are not devastating. Now, if you're a rural farmer, they're probably going to hit you a little harder than they're going to hit us here in Peoria. But I don't think there's any measures we can take that will keep us from getting to that point. The question is, how do we keep from getting Tier 2, 3, and 4 cuts, which would absolutely be devastating for Arizona? So we have to sign on to the drought contingency plan. We have to take voluntary cuts. Nobody likes doing this. We don't even like talking about it. But if we're going to stop those really severe pains in the future, we're going to have to take a little bit of hurt right now. And that's the way that it is with a lot of these issues that we don't want to talk about, we don't want to address. We don't want to be grown-ups, be big boys and big girls and talk about, we got to take some hits here to set ourselves up for the future. And on water supply, that's something we really have to do. So I'm glad we're talking about this tonight, and I hope we can talk about it a little bit more on future questions.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Thank you for the question. That's a great question. I think the thing that no one's mentioned tonight, and it's a larger existential question, is climate change. I have two plans, once in the legislature, what we're going to do about the water crisis. So we need to work with our western states to, Arizona has only really two options for fresh water. That's the Colorado River and our artificial lakes. And so we need those. States like California, which, yes, with much bigger population, they have multiple sources for fresh water. So we really need to negotiate really fight for Arizona and say, look, we live in a desert. These are our only fresh water sources. So we either need to get more and fight for the amount that we do have. The other option I propose is that we need to start seriously investing, like today, a way to get fresh water resources from the Great Lakes out in the Midwest to Arizona. That is something that would be very expensive, yes, but unfortunately with the realities of climate change, there isn't really much option. We need to find fresh water, and we need to start to build the infrastructure to get it here to Arizona. because it is very likely that our fresh water sources are going to deplete in the foreseeable future. And so but thinking in the long term, we need to really hold corporations accountable for the rising CO2 levels, because I'm sorry, we cannot recycle our way out of climate change. We cannot buy our Priuses and recycle and keep and have individual Band-Aid patches for a larger problem that's going on. So again, it goes back to the corporations and their accountability and their effect on our climate and environment.
Thank you. Rick, your 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. It doesn't take you long to live in Arizona to hear the saying that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. One of the things that it seems like listening to the other people on the forum, that it's like nobody's doing anything, but I'm glad to see that we do have some people that are well informed. They are working on this issue. I think it is critical. And I'll just throw out a couple things. One of the things that we've done is let our forestry industry go down for fear of spotted owls. I've heard anywhere from 100 to 300 gallons of water a day per tree. We have forests that are overgrown, uncared for. They haven't been thinned properly. That has reduced our watershed, and Phoenix is talking about their concern that area that their watershed comes from the forest, that the trees take a lot of that water. We could put an industry in that would, one, create jobs, two, create money for our K-12 by harvesting land, the trees and forests. It'd be thinning our forests, which would reduce our fires. I think one other thing that we should look at, we've got a Douglas Ranch addition that they're looking at a potential 100,000 homes, and we've heard about the growth of Arizona. We should start looking at the possibility of putting gray water systems in. Gray water is anything that you use from your house that doesn't go through your toilet. You can process that out into the ground. It filters through the ground, so it's filtered just like your normal rainwater, and it helps the underground water.
Thank you. And Kathy, your additional 30 seconds.
Well, it's positive to hear good ideas. One of the things that I think is really important is that we make sure that the Central Arizona Project and the Arizona Department of Water Resources are speaking the same language, and they have common vision and common goals. And so I would love to be able to help facilitate those kinds of meaningful conversations. As far as forestry goes, nobody loves the forest more than me. I think we've been very slow with the Four Forest Project to get that underway, and I suspect that part of the reason is funding, and so we need to get that on a roll again.
Thank you. This will be the last question in our 2-minute answer round. We'll start with you, Brad. What are your specific plans to make healthcare more affordable in Arizona?
All right, I think I got this one. So healthcare being more affordable. So this is, when we talk about healthcare, there's two different sides of this coin. There's access and there's affordability. We could get everybody in here a healthcare plan that wouldn't cost them a thing, but it's only covered in some other country. It doesn't do them any good because they can't see any doctors there. You got to have real healthcare, and to get that real access, you have to get costs down. That's just the fact of mathematics. We can't have extremely expensive healthcare and cover everybody. You got to get the cost down to cover more people. The way we do that is by, two main measures. One being drug price transparency. The way it is right now, you can go to a Walgreens down the street for your prescription, and it'll be one price. You can go to Walgreens up the street, and it'll be a different price for the same prescription at the same company, the same pharmacy. That doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason to how they price these drugs. And the fact of the matter is, we don't even know how they come up with these numbers. It's not just the drug companies. Now you have the pharmacy benefit managers who get in the middle to take their profits out. So they negotiate all these different plans with pharmacies and insurance companies and providers, and it's a way too complicated system. We need to open that up so that we can see how they come up with those prices, and we do the same thing with hospitals. The other side of that benefit is competition. This is a very basic free market, actually a very conservative idea. When you go to buy a drug, you should be able to see the price of that pharmacy, and make your informed decision to go to that cheaper pharmacy. And then this pharmacy that's charging twice the price, they're going to have to drop that price. That is how we start getting those costs down, and then we can talk about access and getting everybody covered with true comprehensive health care.
Thank you. Gilbert.
Yes, so, we live in a really disappointing healthcare system, to say the least. We can't Medicaid expand our way out into full coverage. We have a patchwork system that does not work for real situations. I unapologetically support a Medicare for all system. Now, I know at the state level, I have limited capabilities of influencing that kind of policy. However, I fully intend to hold our congressmen and women and U.S. senators accountable and pushing them to support Medicare for all system. Folks, we are the only industrialized nation in the country that doesn't have this. We put a man on the moon. We can do this. We already have a Medicare system, but it's only for folks who are 65 years and older. And we're going to keep on running into the same problems. Not enough people insured. Price is still high unless we have a Medicare for all system. Now, how do we pay for it? Right? That's what everybody always says. We have some of the highest cost of healthcare and get some of the lowest quality healthcare in the country. So actually, if we have Medicare for all, it would make the cost a lot cheaper because we would have a more diverse payer pool. So right now we have folks who are elderly and who typically are more sick, who need more healthcare. If we include younger millennials in the workforce who are paying taxes, they actually are going to help reduce the cost of healthcare. Right now, when insurance companies, when folks get sick, your premiums go up. Your premiums go up, your deductibles go up because they don't have it in their business interest to cover you. It's just a business to them. If we have a Medicare for all system, it would actually reduce the cost because of having young, healthy people in the workforce paying for that healthcare, having the young take care of the old. And so we already have it, we just don't have it for everybody. And so I really, really believe this is the way to go. Again, we are the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have this. It isn't rocket science. It really is a matter of increasing the payer diversity in the healthcare system and having the young folks who, on average, don't get as sick as folks over the age of 65. And so we need to have a society that have young people taking care of the old. And that is a Medicare for all system. And I fully intend holding our federal officials accountable for getting that system.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the healthcare is responsible because of the federal problem. The Obamacare has impacted everybody across the country, and it's been a negative. There was a promise that you could keep your physician, but you couldn't. There was the promise that it wouldn't cost you anymore, but it did. There is a limit to what we can do at the state level. Interesting, Bradley, one of the things that we did have a bill on was that if you are a hospital and you were going to have an operation, you had to declare how much that was going to cost ahead of time and do that across the board so that people could evaluate, here's a better deal versus this one. It was interesting, the kind of people that opposed that. But we've been working on that. One of the things I will say too is one of the bills that now Congresswoman Lesko ran for surprise billing. If you go in and you're covered by the hospital, you're covered by the doctor, and all of a sudden you get a bill from an anesthesiologist, that's not in your district or not in your coverage, that was addressed too. So there are things that we're doing to protect. We've actually tweaked that a little bit because language is everything. That's why ballot initiatives are kind of scary at times. We had to tweak that to make sure that it was working a little bit better this year. But those are some of the things that we are working on in the legislature currently.
Thank you. Kathy?
So the reason our health insurance goes up is when people who are sicker longer end up going into the ER without health insurance. And so the way that Arizona has dealt with that to some degree is the Access program, Medicaid, that's partially funded by the federal government. And Access actually is renowned across the country as very efficient and very effective. And so when Governor Brewer was governor, she wanted to expand Medicaid so that more working families could take advantage of it. And we would have fewer people, to the tune of 400,000 people that are uninsured going to the ER or hospitals. My opponent opposed that and in fact passed anyway with bipartisan support and joined a lawsuit to actually overturn it. So the goal, I guess, was to not allow those 400,000 people to have affordable access to health care. That's not the way that I would have done it. I think when we send our federal dollars to the federal government, if we have a way to bring that back into our communities to help our kids and our families, then that's what we should be trying to do.
Thank you. And Brad, your 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I'll continue on the issue of hospital price transparency. So Mr. Gay is correct. My understanding is there is a website that you can go to find different charges for different hospitals. I don't know how to get there, and I've done a lot of homework over the last year figuring this stuff out. So I can only imagine your average person trying to find that out. It needs to be more out in the open. It should be very easy for you to see. I mean, as it's been alluded to before, this is one of our highest expenditures, not just in the government, but in the private side, and we should be letting people make good choices.
Thank you.
Choices.
Thank you. At this time, we will transition to the second part of the debate, where each candidate will receive a separate question with 1 minute to respond. Additionally, on some of the questions, I will announce that this is for a specific candidate, and there'll be a 30-second comment period for those who would like to take it. If you want that, again, please raise your hand so that I can call on you so that we can give our timer a chance to keep things straight. Audience members, you can still submit cards. Please put the name on it of the person you would like to answer the question, and again, please write clearly. Penmanship is appreciated. So Gilbert, we're going to start with you. An audience member is curious about the term social democrat, which has, according to them, been used to describe you. So could you please explain what that term means to you and how it applies to your views and then ultimately your constituents?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, yes, actually, I'm a democratic socialist. This is no secret. Ooh, scary, I know. In a moral economy, we should not have people in this community who are too poor to live. That's it. That's all it is. You know, again, 74% of corporations in this state pay less than $50 a year in corporate income taxes. What that means to me, in a moral, stable, and effective economy, we should be taking care of the least among us. I truly believe that we all do better when we all do better. Right now in Arizona, the rich and corporations get away with no taxes. They have no accountability. They do not believe in taking care of each other. And right now, it's always fascinating to me that, you know, folks are so caught up with labels here and there. But the reality is, we have folks who would stand to benefit from the current system we have. And that current system is exploitation of the working classes. Right now in Arizona, we do not have a government of and by for the people. We have a government of, by, and for corporations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, I will remind the audience, please refrain from, we've got a funny panel here, but laughter, clapping, etc., because we are recording this, and it's very hard for the people doing the post-captioning if there is extra background noise. So we appreciate that. If you would please cooperate. Brad, we are going to address this 1 minute question to you, and there will be a 30-second comment period for the rest of you. What is your experience in writing policy?
I have no experience writing policy. That is in contrast to the two representatives that we have right now, and I would ask you to look at their body of work and see what that experience has gotten them. As I said earlier, this is a time that we need new ideas. We don't need the same old, tired ideas. We've had that for the last 25 years, and it's clearly not working. If you think Arizona is doing great and has no problems, by all means, vote for somebody else. If you think we need to change things up and have innovative ideas, I mean, I've put forward a lot of ideas in this campaign that nobody has ever talked about before. I just put one out today dealing with higher education and how we can combine that with our elderly population who, frankly, I go into their homes and they're just, a lot of them are just lonely. They don't have people to come and visit them. Sometimes I'm the only person that comes in their home and sees them for that month. Some of them need help with their groceries. Some of them need help with errands. We have plenty of high school students who want to earn credit and scholarship dollars to go to universities, community college, technical schools. We should be putting them together and allowing those students to earn that scholarship money. That's just one idea. We need new ideas, not the same old.
Thank you. Kathy, I saw you first.
I have developed policy in the way of bylaws for multiple nonprofit organizations on whose boards I have sat or who I have led as an executive director. I have developed policy 12 years on the Peoria School Board and in 5 years in the executive committee of the Arizona School Boards Association.
Thank you. Rick, I see you.
Well, I don't want to go into the policy, but I would like to be able to rebut. This is where not having a good debate is a little frustrating, because my opponent had talked about me and the lawsuit for the Medicaid expansion. And so I wanted to say one thing when it comes to policy. We have a Prop 108, which was put in by the majority of the people. 3/4 of the people of Arizona voted for that to limit, because we had a decade of tax increase after tax increase after tax increase.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll have to talk about it later.
30 seconds goes by fast.
Goes like that.
Gilbert?
So no, I do not have direct experience writing policy, but like Dr. Hughes says, if you are happy with the current course of action with our current legislators, by all means do not vote for me. But I think the fact that our opponents didn't even bother to show up today tells you everything that you need to know about the current leadership in Arizona. I don't pretend to know everything. I don't. Nobody has all the answers. But what I do promise is that I will show up for the people of this community. I will show up and listen and respond and be a voice for folks who do not have the ability to be here this evening, folks who do not have the privilege to take their time out of their day to come to a debate. Thank you.
Kathy, this question will be just for you. As an independent, do you consider yourself more conservative or liberal in your political philosophy?
I consider myself neither. One of the things that people don't understand about independence is that we're not all alike. We're not all centrists. Some people leave a political party because the political party isn't extreme enough for them. And I certainly have had this experience knocking on doors. I'm an independent because I want to look at every single issue independently of other things. I'm not going to answer to an ideology. I'm going to look at the issue, think about how it's going to impact the people of my community, access information from experts, and find out what it is we need to do to move everybody forward together. So I wouldn't say that I'm right or left on any one issue. You are going to find that on different things, I care about different aspects, and so we need to have a one-on-one conversation about how that is. And I think everybody in their heart is that way.
Thank you. That was just directed to Kathy. This next question is just for you, Rick. According to one of our audience members, you said that in a recently that you would vote for Prop 305. Is that still true, and if so, why?
That was a challenging question for me because, one, I support choice, and two, there are some positive things. There's more transparency, more accountability in that. But the problem I have with it is when it goes to the ballot and it gets plugged in and you cannot change it. In the legislature, we can write a bill, we can tweak it, and quite often the language needs to be tweaked a little bit because you have unintended consequences. When something's passed at the ballot box, you do not have those capabilities to go in and tweak it. So my stand right now is I'm against Prop 305.
Thank you. Gilbert, your next question. So you frequently stated that 74% of corporations pay only $50 minimum tax. Can you please clarify if that number or how that number incorporates pass-through corporations whose individual pays the taxes or corporations that did not have any net income? So can you please clarify your statistic?
Sorry, can you repeat the middle of that question? I did not hear.
Yes. Can you clarify how your statistics of 74% pay the $50 minimum? How does that incorporate pass-through corporations and corporations that had no net income? So how does that, can you explain your statistic?
Yeah, so let me clarify this statistic. That is true. So 74% of corporations in Arizona pay less the $50 minimum tax liability. So that's what I meant when I say 74% of corporations don't pay their fair share of taxes. The tax liability, which is different from obviously property taxes, any other or city taxes, county taxes. That's what I meant by that.
Okay. Brad, we'll go for you on this next one, and this will have a 30-second optional comment period. What are your plans for Second Amendment laws that we currently have in Arizona?
Well, the Second Amendment is an amendment, so you cannot change that. It's not negotiable. As far as things we can do to improve gun safety, and for me, this is two sides of the same coin again. So their gun safety and their school safety. And my plan is clearly outlined on my website and Facebook and all that. So the first thing is universal background checks. This is almost universally accepted. If you're going to have any background checks, they have to be universal. It doesn't do good to have a background check in certain areas and not others. Here in Arizona, we have gun shows at least once a month. So anyone can go to one of those and get around those laws. The second thing I want to talk about, I'm going to run out of time, I think, but kind of one of my more innovative ideas is a luxury tax on ammunition sales. So this would be a very small amount. So anyone who's trying to just worry about home defense, they're not going to be buying the volume of bullets for this to even hurt them. It's people who use it for recreation. And we use those funds to pay for school counselors, school psychologists, and teacher training to recognize warning signs in our students who frankly have mental health issues that just go unaddressed.
Thank you. Optional 30 seconds.
I'll just say this. Recently, I went to a forum that Leadership West had held, and the two speakers were somebody who was a social worker and taught social workers in higher education, and the other was somebody from the NRA. And they surprisingly agreed wholeheartedly on one thing, and that's that we need to fund better social emotional care in our public schools, and I would be fully behind that.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes, and I would like to add that a recent study came out this year that now SROs, that is student resource officers, now outnumber social workers in schools. Now, I think that's a huge problem. We don't, unfortunately, train the SROs enough to how to de-escalate a tense situation that they may be having with a student who may be having mental or behavioral issues. And so I think if we need to fund social workers and actual trained professionals with students who may be having behavioral problems, and I do not believe that SROs are fully equipped with the training that they do have. I think most people can agree to handle situations that may be out of hand, out of their training.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass because 30 seconds is just not enough time.
Fair enough. So Kathy, we'll start with you on this one, and again, we'll do an optional 30-second comment. What is your position on Prop 127?
I actually think that, well, fundamentally, I'm a greenie. I absolutely believe that renewable energy is the wave of the future, and that Arizona has everything to gain by being a leader in developing that industry. There's an awful lot of conflicting information, and certainly when I see those commercials, I react like everyone else. I don't want my electricity bills to go up. But what I think fundamentally is, regardless of whether or not that passes, and thank goodness it is in the hands of the voters, that the free market economy is going to move that industry forward, and that ultimately we will all benefit, and the faster we can do that, the better.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes, so I fully support Proposition 127. I find it fascinating, people, the ratepayers are going to be paying more. So what a lot of folks don't know is that APS submitted an integrated resource plan to the Corporation Commission last year, detailing their 15-year plan and how they intend to power Arizona in the next 15 years, and nowhere in there did it state their plans to investing in renewable energy. So actually, they plan on increasing their use of fossil fuels by 40% by the year 2032. And so, no, you're right, your bills will not be going up, and APS has no intention of investing in renewable energy.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, so again, 30 seconds is certainly not on this issue either. I'm still undecided on Prop 127. I fully support renewable energy. My plan is 100% by 2050. But is this the right way to do it? I don't know yet. I don't buy APS's talking points. I don't buy Tom Steyer's talking points. The truth is somewhere in the middle. SRP just put out, I believe, a study today that this would increase rates by maybe 5%. So the truth is we probably would see a small increase, not the monster numbers APS is reporting. And the question is, do we want to pay that bill now, or do we want to wait until it's an emergency and pay it later?
Thank you. Rick?
No, I'm totally opposed to 127. I think the impact is going to be very negative especially on the poor. We are going to see property taxes change. If you're in an APS area, your property valuations are going to go down because you're going to be taxed higher than if your costs are going to go higher than if you're in an SRP area. I think that's just unfair. And again, when you've got issues that go to the ballot, if you find out it's wrong, you can't just say, oops, let's redo this. The legislature would have to come up with 2/3, and it would have to, in essence, you're supposed to support or go in the direction. So I'm totally opposed to it.
Thank you. So Rick, this one came from an audience member regarding a vote on SB 1257. According to the audience member, you voted yes on concealed weapons in public buildings. Could you explain that position?
I don't remember the bill, so I would have to actually take a look at the language on that bill.
Okay.
Oh, and when does it say what year it was?
It does not.
Because I don't remember a bill this year on that. So I would, again.
So then, what's your position on concealed weapons in public buildings?
Well, it's obviously if you've got, we've got buildings that you can't take them in. My view is if you've got a place where there's no guns, that can actually be more dangerous, because if somebody isn't going to abide by the law, they're going to bring a gun in anyway. So I think there's some concerns with that, but again, I don't remember the bill or the language.
Thank you. Gilbert, next question. How will you represent your constituents in a way that will distinguish you from Tony Rivera?
Thank you for that question, whoever asked that. Again, I think the fact that my opponent decided not to show up today tells you everything you need to know about his priorities in the community. Mr. Rivero is the third most absent legislator in the state legislature. He clearly does not value this position and the responsibilities it holds. He did not bother to show up today and discuss the ideas and the issues that are most critical to our community. So I believe that I've done more in this past year than he's done in the past 4 years. And so I think it is important that we elect leaders who are accountable. We will not agree on every issue. That just isn't reality. But I do promise that I will listen, and that I will listen to the experts. I will listen to what the voters say. And if they so choose not to re-elect me in 2020, that is their right. But I do believe that I am an accountable leader, and I will show up every single day to work hard on behalf of the working people of Arizona.
Thank you. So, Brad, it seems like I have all these questions for you that are really good for everyone else to comment on too. So this will be another one with a plus 30 seconds. What will be your first bill that you'd like to introduce?
That's an interesting question. So I don't think I would introduce just one. You don't have to do it one at a time. You can introduce a lot of bills all at once. But I think the priority for me right away would be on the healthcare costs, because that's something that it's not like we pass a bill and all of a sudden your costs are down the next day. This is something that takes time, and it's an issue that we have to get in front of before it spirals out of control. So I think that would be my first priority, is to get those price transparency and access bills on the books, so that we can start getting those prices down and really address that issue.
Thank you. Optional 30 seconds. Gilbert?
If the first bill that I would introduce would be to repeal right to work. It is one of those buzzwords that trick voters into thinking that it's looking out for their best interests, and it's not. Workers who are part of unions, according to the statistics, have higher wages and have higher workplace protection. So repealing the right to work law would be one of my #1 priorities in the legislature.
Thank you. Kathy?
I would propose a bill to restore full-day kindergarten.
Okay, thanks. Rick?
Thank you. And rather than just say a bill, one of my focus is going to be on more of a comprehensive, proactive approach in the legislature, again, to look at K-12 in a comprehensive plan, and to look at our taxes in a more comprehensive plan. So instead of just tweaking here and there, because that's what we do a lot of the times with bills, we're doing something more comprehensive and more complete and holistic. So those are the 2 key areas of focus for me.
Thank you. Kathy, next question. So this audience member would like to know, if you were elected to the Senate, would you be willing to compromise with the GOP legislators? And they actually reference the Democrats in the last summer the all or nothing approach. So would you be willing to compromise on educational funding?
Compromise has become a dirty word. Well, Americans are so polarized now. Would I be willing to sit down with both sides? Absolutely. Somebody said nobody has cornered the market on bad ideas. Nobody's cornered the market on good ideas too. I get asked frequently, who am I going to caucus with? I don't know. I don't know what the results of the election are going to be, but I'll tell you this, that I want to glean the best ideas from both sides. If I have the ability to be a bridge from one side to the other and ensure that those ideas can move forward for the benefit of everybody, then that would be my goal. How's it going to work? We don't know. It's a big adventure, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. You guys have a lot of questions. So, Rick, this question is only for you. Audience member is curious if APS has contributed to your campaign.
Yes, they have.
And if so, how much?
I'd have to take a look. I don't know. You know, money comes in. For me, there's a lot of concern that if somebody gives you money, you're going to vote that way. One of the things I've found is that people that contribute, people are PACs that contribute. They contribute because they want you there, because you're open-minded. I've got people lobbyists that come to me and say, at least you listen. There's some people that just don't listen. I look at both sides. That doesn't mean that I'm going to side with them. I had one lobbyist that I actually became friends with, and I was on Commerce Committee. I was vice chair. I knew where the votes were coming. And I knew where our chair was going to be. I knew that I could kill that bill or move it onto the floor. I thought it was a bad bill. I killed it. I don't think, at least for me, I know for me, the money doesn't matter. It's doing what's right because it's right.
Thank you. Gilbert, next question. An audience member is curious on your perspective of, do you expect one class of people to pay for another? And if that's the case, then what happens when the money runs out?
It's a great question. You know, it's funny because we already have one class of people paying for another, and that's the working class against the rich. We've been paying for, again, like I mentioned earlier, there is a tax loophole on the books right now to give tax credits to folks who pay memberships for country clubs. I don't know anybody who has a country club. I don't have folks. That isn't a priority of mine to give rich people a tax credit for country clubs. Now, that is already happening right now. That is the system that we currently have. I believe in making it fair for all folks. This isn't coming out of a hatred of one class over another. It is for the love of my community. People who are living on fixed incomes, seniors in Sun City who are living on fixed incomes, the single mom who's working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and still can't make ends meet. Those are the folks who I'm trying to represent, because those are the folks who are the majority. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad, your question, just for you. What do you propose to do to eliminate fatalities by distracted drivers?
Well, I mean, I think there is one solution that is pretty straightforward. It was all Surprise do it this past year, is to ban texting while driving or distracted driving in general. You need to be using hands-free device if you're driving. That's kind of a no-brainer. There's lots of things we do like that in the interest of public safety. So it's not a personal liberty concern for me. I think it's just common sense, and it will save us all a lot of money and grief in the long run. The other thing is we need to be investing in technologies like driverless cars. 30,000 people in the United States or more die in motor vehicle accidents every year. That is preventable. If we have the technology that can make our driving safer and make it more convenient for all of us, then we should be investing in that. And I think we're going to see more and more in that here in Arizona and across the country in the next few years.
Thank you. Kathy, this next one is for you, and we'll have the optional 30 seconds. So what is your position on the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment?
So I don't know if everybody knows, but it was a Republican proposal to pass the Equal Rights Amendment back in the day. And then the pushback was, well, if we did that, women might go to work. And I think that ship has sailed. And so I think when a woman has the same job as a man that she should be paid equal wage. Right now, I think it's about 83 cents on the dollar that women are paid compared to men. And that comes to some $7,300 a year that she is shortchanged. And so would I support the Equal Rights Amendment? Absolutely.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes, I would support the Equal Rights Amendment. It's a shame that we have not, in the year 2018, passed the Equal Rights Amendment in Arizona.
Brett?
Yeah, so if you've actually read the text of the amendment, it's the most benign language you could ever imagine. It says a man and woman are equal. And the pushback I've heard, at least recently, is that, well, we already do that. We don't need it. So why follow through with it? Well, then why not? I mean, it's just a no-brainer to me. So yes, I would support it.
Thank you. Okay. So, Rick, this one's for you, and we'll have the optional 30-second comment period. What is your position on Prop 126?
Prop 126 is basically concerned with raising taxes on services. I've never had an interest in raising taxes on services. Again, my view, I'm opposed to Prop 126, not because I want to raise taxes, but because I don't want to put something in the Constitution. We need to be able to have a holistic view of what we do with our tax system. Again, I think that so many people are looking at this thinking if we don't put that in, that we will raise tax services. I know there are people on the left that want to increase that. Right now, if we were to put taxes, talking about healthcare, if we were to put taxes on services, the DOR says we could get $5.2 billion a year, but almost half of that would come from healthcare. That's not a good thing.
Thank you. Kathy?
So I would not vote to do what it wants to do, which is a constitutional amendment that says no taxes on any service ever. And I think a constitutional amendment that puts legislators into a corner like that, then they lose the ability to negotiate on your behalf. And so I would say no. And just to talk about a bill that I would run, one that I would run is that instead of saying no on 126, protect property taxes, protect property taxpayers, it would say it means no taxes on services ever.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, so I am going to vote no on Prop 126, and it's not because I want to raise taxes on services. Frankly, the only discussion I've heard around that at all is with expanding the sales tax base. So you open it up, but then you bring the rate down. So you're not using it just to slap it on top of the existing sales tax. You're using it to make things more fair, more across the board. And when you do it like that, depending on where you set the rate, you could bring in some more money. You don't need to bring in $5 billion. I think that's too much. But we could use that as a way to even things out and bring in a little bit more money for the state. I don't want to tie our hands in that way.
Thank you.
I am currently still undecided on Prop 126. Just want to put that for the record.
All right, this will be our last round of questions before we go into the closing comments. That was for you, Rick. So, Gilbert, as a House of Representative legislator, how will you encourage new business ventures?
It's a great question.
And we'll have the plus 30 should you want to comment.
So a lot of folks in our community, especially in Old Town Peoria and El Mirage, I want to really educate the community about the existing tax incentives we have for small businesses. For one, we have a tax incentive on the books right now that would reimburse small businesses, and that's businesses with employees fewer than 50 employees, reimburse them up to $10,000 for any costs associated with hiring a tax accountant to get their finances in order. You know, big corporations, they can afford to have a tax attorney or a tax accountant on their staff. Small mom and pop shops can't afford that, and so I really want to do more education out in the community. Let folks know, hey, you can write this off up to $10,000 to hire a tax accountant or attorney to make sure you're in compliance and make sure you're in order. So really, it begins with education of some of the really awesome tax incentives we currently do have.
Thank you. Kathy?
Tax incentives for businesses can be a really good idea. I think where the legislature has fallen down is not taking the opportunity to revisit those tax incentives and to ensure that they are, in fact, supplying the return on investment that they promised to do in the first place. And then the other thing we need to do to lure businesses here is have a high-quality education system that builds a workforce and it attracts people who want to come here and raise their kids here and work in our businesses.
Thank you. So Rick, then Brett.
And I would agree with the tax credit review. I think that that is something that we need to begin to do. As a businessman, I would make investments in advertising because I knew when I was spending thousands of dollars a month, that was going to bring in more business for me. We do have to do a review of our tax credits. But I do think too, when we talk about how education is so key, I think we've got a lot of good educators, we've got a lot of good districts. If you look at our businesses that are coming in, one of the things that they say that they're moving here for is because of our workforce.
Thank you. Brett?
Oh, thank you. Tax incentives are fine. I think they should be tiered, as in if you're a smaller business, you can take advantage of this. If you're a giant corporation, you don't necessarily need that tax credit, because I think the advantage of your tax system in your state is way overblown. There's a handful of states right now that have no corporate income tax. I don't see Amazon and Google and all those companies flocking over there. They stay in California where the taxes are higher. So it's more complicated than that. So the way that we draw them in is we make Arizona a place that people want to be. That's what you need. That's what those businesses want. You do that with strong education. You do that with strong infrastructure. You do that with strong healthcare. All the things we've been talking about tonight, we move in that direction, the businesses and the people are going to want to be here.
Thank you. So Brad, this question is for you. What is your position on giving teachers automatic raises versus pay for merit and performance?
Of course, paying for merit and performance is a fine thing if you have good measures of the merit and the performance. And standardized testing is just not a good measure of that. I mean, there's lots of things that can influence that. It puts way too much pressure on our educators. If you tie their income, and we saw this in the healthcare profession, we started tying doctors' compensation to patient satisfaction scores. That gave us, in part, the opioid crisis that we're dealing with right now. It's not about necessarily making those people happy. It's about doing what's right. And sometimes doing what's right may not translate to a standardized test. We shouldn't be penalizing teachers for doing that. So if we had a good measure for what was actually a good outcome for those teachers in those classrooms, absolutely we should do merit-based. But right now we just don't have that.
Thank you. That was actually just for Brad.
Okay.
Kathy, this question is just for you. Beyond education, what other issues are you passionate about for Arizonans and the west side of Metro Phoenix?
Well, so many things are connected to education, but like I said, job attraction is really important to me. I have daughters in their 20s, and I'm concerned that the West Valley isn't bringing the kinds of business and the kinds of amenities that are going to keep them here, that are going to keep them wanting to raise their families here. It's really a sad thing sometimes when they say that they don't see their future here in Arizona. And so the way we do that is we invest in the amenities that are going to attract young people, and that means high-tech industry, that means restaurants, that means sports, and I also believe that we need to ensure that our climate is one that people see themselves living here long-term and raising their kids here, and we need to do more to protect our environment.
Okay, and this will be the final question. Rick, it's directed to you, but we will have the additional 30 seconds. So what will you do to make sure your constituents are informed and engaged and have access to you?
Well, it's interesting because I've had a lot of people that have come up now about my debates and I'm not debating. When I've had something on my calendar, I've always had an open door. I've always invited people to either meet in the district or come to the Capitol. I've had Democrats that complained that, oh, I'm not represented. And I said, you know, let's do a coffee together. You can invite some of your friends over, I'll come over, we'll talk. So this whole thing of, and this is, I've done this, I was in the House for 6 years, and I've always been open, and I've met with people that didn't always agree with me because I think that's important. You do represent everybody in the district. You will not be able to vote in agreement with everybody in the district because there are differences of views. But I've always consistently met with people. One of the things they talked about this last session when I wasn't there for a Friday and they said, where are you, why aren't you working? when we have Fridays off. I actually had that morning, I had a legislative forum, and right after that, I met with the new superintendent at Dysart, so I was working. People just don't always understand.
Thank you. And other ideas? I see Kathy and I see Brad.
Well,
And then Gilbert.
I think being open-minded means having the willingness to actually change your mind, to listen to people who have different perspectives, different experiences, and then you can assimilate them into your own and look at the landscape of the people that you represent and make the best decision for the most of them. As far as me being open, I am an open book, and always have been, and so people feel free to call me and email me and meet with me one-on-one, and that will continue.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've committed to, and this is on my website, now it's going to be on video, so you can hold me to it. I'll be holding town halls in the district at least once a month while I'm in office. Another thing that we can use is technology that has connected us more than anything else. Part of what I do in my job is I do telemedicine, so I actually connect with patients sometimes in New Mexico. So there's no reason that our legislators can't connect with the people in their districts. The people that I'm representing deserve to know where I am when I'm on the clock for them, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. And that's what I'm committed to making sure my constituents know.
Thank you. And Gilbert?
You took my bread. No, I do also fully intend on having a town hall bi-monthly while the legislature is in session. Like Brad said, with today's technology, there is no excuse why our political leaders cannot show up and be accessible to folks in the community. So I do intend having bi-monthly town halls while the legislature is in session.
All right. At this point in time, we will move to our closing statements. Gilbert, we'll start with you and then advance down the table.
Thank you so much.
1 minute.
Thank you all tonight for coming. I really appreciate your civic participation in the political process and for coming to listen to the candidates and our ideas and our qualifications. This is a really exciting and terrifying time in our country and in Arizona. There's lots on the table. Again, I promise to be a state representative for the entire community. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, at the end of the day, we are all part of the working class. We are all folks who work day in, day out. We all want the same things at the end of the day. We all want a secure future. We want our kids to go to a good school, and we all want to be able to save for retirement. And so I thank you all for coming out tonight, because this is where democracy happens, is holding your leaders accountable, seeing who shows up and who doesn't show up. This is what democracy is about. It is not a spectator sport. You must participate. You must engage. You must ask questions. And so I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to working with whoever wins in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you. I want to thank you again for having the debate, everyone for coming, everyone who's going to watch this. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about different policies, so I want to use my closing to kind of contrast myself with my opponents who are not here. I wish they had been, and I do want to commend Mr. Gray for showing up. I know it's not always easy when you're kind of the only one on that side, so I do want to thank you for at least showing up and explaining your views. Our representatives, they don't show up for work. They take money from lobbyists. They take money from PACs. They let lobbyists testify for them on committees. They let lobbyists, in some cases, write the bills. That is not how government is supposed to work. Those people work for you. You should be able to get them on the phone and say, this is a concern I'm having. They may not be able to take care of it for you, but they should listen, and they should not be prioritizing lobbyists and special interests and specially writing bills for them, for their profits, and has nothing to do with you. So this is why I'm committed to working with the people in this district, not special interests, not rich donors from other parts of the state. I will work for this district. I will show up for work. I will always be honest with you. I'll always be available, and that's my commitment to you.
Thank you. Kathy?
I too want to thank Clean Elections and the people who came here to listen to us tonight. Arizona is a wonderful state, but we have some really big problems that have arisen since the recession in 2009 that haven't been addressed. Right now, we have the 6th highest unemployment in the country, the 8th highest suicide rate, we're number 31 in senior care, 47th in education, and a quarter of our kids live in poverty. I believe that we can do better, but if we keep electing the same people, we're going to get the same results. I'm different. I am truly different. I will put the public interest ahead of any partisan or special interest. Just like on the school board, when we solve problems, we solve them for everybody, regardless of their political background or their ideology. My name is Kathy Connect. I'm a genuine alternative to the status quo, and I will put people over politics and I'd be humbled to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrick.
When I first ran for office in the House, my commitment was to help create the economy that was going to grow our base, grow our tax revenues, help bring prosperity to the state. We have gone that direction. We have been able to accomplish that. Just in the last 4 years, we've had over 300 companies come to Arizona. We've had almost 250,000 people get jobs here. That is working. That is growing the pie. Winston Churchill had said, if you try to raise revenue by taxing yourself into prosperity, it's like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handles. One of the things I want to say, though, is my opponent has talked about her leadership, her concern for kids. There's a YouTube video out that shows where she, in a boardroom meeting, admitted that she raised money. Her focus was on packing kids in the classroom so that they could raise money. Is that leadership? Is that care for our kids? I don't think so. And one other thing is, while
Thank
she
you.
was in her, and I will have to quit, but if you look at her record.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, to our candidates, we thank you all for participating in our forum. And to our audience members, we thank all of you who took the time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to visit www.azcleanelections.gov/voter-dashboard for a customized experience to find information on the general election, the candidates, the issues, and to view this debate on demand. Please fill out the debate evaluation form you received when you came in and return it to one of our volunteers. Your feedback is important to the commission, and it will help us improve future debates. We're almost there. Thank you all for coming tonight. You're welcome to stay and speak directly if you have further questions of our candidates. Thank you and good night.